Does the body matrix system actually work, and is it better than Kibbe? This week I decided to take myself as my own client and finally analyze my body shape and try to figure out where I sit on the body matrix. I'm going to show you the exact process step by step, so if you want to see how I do it, let's dive right in. So why do we care about our body type? Well, for a lot of people, you might want to figure out what the best shapes, lengths, and necklines are for you in order to create outfits that look more harmonious. Now, after you know your body type, it absolutely doesn't mean that you have to follow those recommendations, but if you're someone that maybe wants to look more polished and put together and just dress in alignment with your body, then knowing what your body type is can make that process a lot easier. For those of you that maybe aren't familiar with the body matrix, it is a system created by Ellie Royden because she found the 10 Kibbe body types to be insufficient to type all of the women she was seeing. She actually created 3 different categories: width, length, and shape. And within each of those categories, there are 3 different options. For example, for width, we have wide, medium, and narrow. And so combining each of those 3 options for the 3 categories gives us 27 different body matrix types. And so I've been intrigued by Ellie's system for quite a while, but using her book itself, I wasn't actually able to type myself. And so recently I bought the Body Matrix companion tool and decided to put myself through that typing and also use my own process that I use with my clients to help them find their body matrix. And so the first thing that I ask of my clients is to actually send me a photo of themselves from about 2-3 meters away, taken at a chest level with the phone really straight. And this is the photo that I had. Now, I usually ask my clients to send me photos in a variety of different necklines, lengths, skirt flowiness, pants, different types of outfit, so I can see how they look like in different shapes. And that is because, personally, I find it a little bit easier to determine whether something looks better or worse when the person is actually wearing clothes versus when they're just a body type in a swimsuit or in workout clothes. So let me take you through the entire process and show you what my body matrix is. All right, so the first thing that I did was to take my photo, and I did that vertically from about 2.5-3 meters, and the camera was placed at a chest height. I'm also wearing my sports bra and leggings, and they're not necessarily very shaping, so this is generally quite a truthful representation of my body. Now, what I did is I went over and I basically drew these lines over my body, and this is what I am seeing in here. And so you can see that probably the most prominent one is that my shoulders and my chest are basically the same width, and then they are a little bit narrower than the hips, but not necessarily much narrower, and then I have quite a significant roundedness in my hips. These are the first observations, but it doesn't really tell me much, and so I'm going to start going through each of the components. Now, the first one that I usually start with my clients is width. And here are a couple of different photos, and I've put a photo of me from about 10 years ago when I was in my early 20s, much slimmer, because I feel like your bone structure doesn't actually change that much. And so basically the way to diagnose whether you have narrowness in the shoulders is to have a look at the line between your armpit and then the end of your shoulder bone. And then if this line is vertical or very lightly slanted, this means you have narrow shoulders. Now, you can see for myself that basically this line is vertical at the moment, and even when I was much slimmer, you can see again that the line is pretty much vertical. Where my shoulders end is not actually far away from my chest, my armpit. And so my shoulders seem to be quite narrow. The other sign that Ellie talks about a lot is shoulder bags falling off of your shoulders. And the thing is, like, I don't own really any shoulder bags, or I don't wear them as shoulder bags because they're always sliding. I can't really do that. And the only way for me to wear a shoulder bag is if I have a blazer, because it creates a shoulder, but in any other way, it just doesn't stay. And so my shoulders are definitely narrow. Now, the second part is the rib cage, the chest. And in here, I took the different examples from Ellie's book, and I'm basically somewhere between the medium and narrow. Like, kind of look similar to maybe like this lady. I can't really tell like what a narrow rib cage truly means. I'm not seeing like a massive difference, but I don't think I have a particularly narrow rib cage, but it's also definitely not wide. And so I put myself somewhere between medium and narrow. And finally, when it comes to bone structure, I would say that my hands and my ankles are not necessarily extremely delicate, but they're definitely on the thinner side. My head is quite kind of small and thin. My fingers aren't wide at all. And so generally, again, I would put myself maybe somewhere somewhere in the medium. I'm not delicate. I've never really been delicate, but I definitely don't have also like bluntness and more like substantial bone structure. Then I started to look at other clues. And first of all, when it comes to the shoes that I wear, I am very fond of pointed toe and shoes that are quite slim. And even when it comes to things like sneakers, which aren't necessarily slim, I always opt for the most narrow version of them. And also with my combat boots, I can't really do chunky soles. And so even for them, I try to find the most narrow version that I could find. So they are a medium weight shoe because they're not really slim. They're not as slim as those boots, but they are the narrowest version of this type of shoe. And so I naturally gravitate and literally only buy shoes that are in the narrow to medium range. Similarly, I also looked at the jewelry that I wear, and most of my necklaces and rings are, I would say, quite thin. Like, they're not extremely narrow, but every time I try to wear anything that is quite wide, I can't really do that. And even something that's quite a kind of medium weight, it feels sometimes a bit off place. Same thing with a wide bangle, like it just feels very off against me and I never really wear them. And same thing with sandals. All of my sandals that I've really worn a lot have been with those very, very thin straps. Again, not extremely delicate, but definitely thin. I also started to look at different necklines, and I feel like if you have width, something that creates a lot of openness in the chest and the shoulders will actually look really good. And you can see in here that it feels very off. Like, it looks like things are going to literally fall off my shoulders, and they kind of are. And that's usually what happens with straps for me. Whenever I wear like tank tops and dresses or anything like that with straps, they pretty much fall off. Same thing with bra straps, no matter how much I tighten them. And so these are all signs of narrow shoulders, generally narrowness. And so I knew that I definitely don't have width. And so my hypothesis is that I fall somewhere between the medium and narrow part of the width spectrum. And so I needed to check how I respond to different necklines, to cuffs, and whether they need to be cinched or not, and also to different ankle widths. And so in here, I've sort of outlined some of the more narrow necklines and some of the more medium necklines. Now, from the narrowness, this is the one that is definitely very narrow, and those have kind of wider straps, so they're narrow medium. And then these are the more medium, so they have some openness, but they're also not wide, like they're not kind of opening up the entire chest. And it can be something like a slightly wider v-neck. You can see compared to, for example, this one is a little bit more open, but it's not crazy open, right? Like, it's not like it was before. And so I wanted to compare the narrow versus medium. And you can see that like both of those outfits are the same when it comes to roundedness and length. So there is nothing there that is different besides the neckline. Now, I don't think I look bad on the left, but I think I look slightly better with the slightly more open neckline. Now, I also decided to take some of the shirts that could be open and then see how they look when they are at different openness. So for example, here they're fully buttoned up, so this is very narrow and you can see how the cuffs are basically cinched. Here I've introduced a little bit of openness, and this one is kind of more of a medium openness. You can see kind of there is a bit more width in the sleeve compared to, for example, here. Now, I think that personally, if I had to go out, I would go in something like this. This feels the most harmonious, and this is that kind of in between the narrow and medium. I feel like I'm a little bit stuffed in here, like a little bit restricted, and this one feels fine, like it doesn't feel bad, but I kind of prefer it slightly less open because there is a lot of width already in the sleeves, even though the cuffs are actually narrow. So far I'm kind of leaning for somewhere between narrow and medium, like not medium and not narrow. Now I wanted to look at different skirts, and again I'm using exactly the same top, so the only difference here is the skirts, and the skirts have pretty much the same length. Now they're made of similar fabrics, and so the only thing really is that these skirts are narrow, these are medium wide, and these are wide. So you can see kind of there's a lot of space in here. They flare. Those are kind of like a little bit off the body, and those are very fitted. Now, again, personally, I think something like this looks better than me being very narrow, or those look all right. Like, they don't look bad, but they don't look fantastic. I feel like something like this is probably the best. But if I was truly narrow, this would look a lot better than this, and it doesn't. And so that kind of points me again that I am not at the very narrow end of width. Same thing in here, and I feel like here is even more visible because, again, if I was truly narrow, these narrow ones would look a lot better than any of the others. And I just don't think that's the case. I feel like, again, it feels a little bit restrictive and almost like I won't open up kind of the neck a little bit. And so I feel like something like this, where there is a little bit more breathing space for my calves, for my legs, just kind of looks a little bit more harmonious with me. And in here with pairs of ankle pants, you can see again, these are very narrow, these are medium, and these are medium wide. And again, if I was very, very narrow and that was a definite narrowness in my entire body, this would look a lot better than any of this. And I don't think that's the case. I feel like I look pretty balanced, pretty good in both of those things, because there is narrowness here and here. I feel like I kind of don't need it in the bottoms as well. Does it look bad? No. But does it look significantly better? Also no. And I wanted to compare one of my favorite summer tops. I've had this for about 7 years, and the fact that I've not thrown it away like definitely means that I like it. But you can see how, again, this is narrow plus medium. And I feel like the openness in the bottom here just makes it appear just a tiny bit more balanced. Like I don't need to be cinched everywhere. I don't need that narrowness everywhere. And similarly in here, if we just change the top, I feel like this level of openness just gives me a little bit more breathing space. Like it looks a little bit more balanced, more harmonious. And finally, I just wanted to compare again. So these are more narrow necklines compared to this. And again, like that sort of slightly more medium open bottom, I think looks better than the very, very cinched and narrow ones. And so I feel like this actually looks the best, like the medium plus medium or the medium plus narrow. I feel like they look better than the very narrow plus narrow one. I feel like I look a little bit more like I can move, I can breathe, and there is that space. And so I feel like for me, I fall very, very neatly in between medium and narrow. And if I had to pick, I'll probably pick medium as a category, because I feel like I can handle some width in my tops, but at the same time, my shoulders are quite narrow, so I have to account for that. And how I'm interpreting this is that there needs to be some element of narrowness somewhere in the outfit. And so that can be the cuffs, that can be the neckline, that can be the skirt hem, that can be the ankle, that can be even the shoes. Something needs to be quite narrow. Or if I have that narrowness in one point of my body, then I can have more of a medium and even wide somewhere else. Or if I have a medium top, then I need to have a medium bottom. So you can see kind of in here, I have narrow plus maybe medium wide, narrow plus medium wide. And these all look fine because this top is very narrow. And then if I want to have more of a medium top like in here, then the bottoms need to be narrow or medium plus medium. And these all look, I would say, equally well. And so that's kind of why I would see myself in between the medium and narrow width, but let's say slightly more medium, but accommodating some narrowness somewhere in the outfit. And that's why I feel like I've been really struggling, because I am not clearly narrow and I'm not clearly medium. The next thing, and I feel like this one was super interesting for me, is actually the length. So I took my photo and I shared it yesterday with you, and I asked you to tell me, what do you think my height is based on this photo? And again, I've taken the photo in the way that it was recommended. So it's fully straight on. And these are the results. These are your guesses. So you can see there's lots of people that said I was around 5'5", 5'6", but there was actually quite a lot of you as well that thought I was also much taller than that. So in the 5'7", 5'8", and even 5'9" region. And there was only a few of you that said 5'4" or below. Now, this was really interesting for me because I don't consider myself to be a tall person, because my actual height is 164 or somewhere between 5'4" and 5'5". And so all of you pretty much thought that I was much, much taller than I actually am. This is something that is so interesting because my height is medium, but you thought I'm taller. And I think that is because my head appears smaller than my body. And that is usually what a tall person would look like. So shorter people would have a head that looks a little bit bigger, longer than their body, like than it should be. And then taller people, their head is usually a little bit smaller than the body. But the thing is that if you look at my actual proportions, so as Ellie advises, kind of from neck to waist and then from waist till knee, you can see that like there is not a huge difference, and none of those lines are actually very, very long. I am not necessarily in the long category. Like my height puts me very, very firmly into medium, but I do appear a bit longer. And so let's look at what that means and how I can accommodate that. So my hypothesis, again, is that I am a medium height, but leaning, if I had to pick where I lean towards long rather than short. And so what I had to check was whether ankle length, which is the length recommended for trousers for a medium person, is better than short or longer trousers. And also, if someone has length, they usually can handle oversized clothes. And if someone doesn't, usually they look a little bit swamped by an oversized look. So let's have a look. Firstly, I decided to pick all of my narrow and rounded pants, and I have quite a lot of them. And now for some pairs like those Adidas ones, they are actually quite long, but I could actually cuff them, and you can see that it creates two different lengths. Now, looking at all three of those, I feel like somewhere here, like those kind of medium length ones are probably the best length, but those longer ones don't actually look disproportionate. Like they don't look crazy. These are like kind of maybe the longest ones. These are slightly below the ankle, but they all look quite well. And those pants, as much as I really like them, styled in this way where my entire ankle is visible, just make it seem like I have outgrown those trousers, and that is not the effect that I want. So you can see that often whenever I wear those, I've kind of been subconsciously aware of that. And so I always wear them either with my black sock boots, with black socks, or with those higher combat boots, which basically create one longer line. And so you can see kind of how the blazer here as well kind of creates a bit of a longer line. And so they don't look cropped or short. But out of the three, I feel like the short ones definitely aren't the best. Now, if we look at more medium width pants, so pants that are kind of open, like they're not wide, but they're kind of medium openness at the bottom, you can see how if we start going longer, it's fine, but it's not great. And I feel like an ankle length here definitely works better. And so that kind of leans me more towards medium length. Now, if we start going even broader, so barrel-like pants is kind of more of a wider shape, you can see how here, those are quite narrow, so they work fine. Those are a medium width, they also work fine. And the moment that those are basically quite long and they're quite wide, it stops working. And so in here, I would say that if I was long, those kind of pants would work quite fine, but if I'm not long, they would be a little bit overwhelming. And so you can see how both of those pairs look a lot better than those that are long length. And I also started to look at wider leg pants. And now, when it comes to wider leg pants, you can see how all of those are actually quite fitted up to the knee. And again, you can see how the short ones, as much as I love those, they look kind of disproportionate. Like they look too short for me. Those medium ones look great. And even the longer ones aren't terrible, right? So if I was short to medium, this would be too long, but it doesn't look bad, like it's fine. And so you can see again, I would place like myself as medium length, but more towards the longer side than the short. And finally, if we look at more of a actually wide leg pants that are not fitted at all from the waist down, so they're more of a straight leg shape, you can see now that because they're wide, adding length is already breaking it, like it's making them too much. And even softer fabrics like those in here, they don't look great. And the only way for me to kind of wear more of a straight leg pant like those, it has to be ankle length. It can't go any kind of longer than that because I start to look disproportionate. And so you can see kind of that medium length works in softer fabrics, medium fabrics, and stiffer fabrics, and kind of like regardless of the shape, this medium length, so things that stop just at the ankle, maybe tiny bit above it or tiny bit below, but kind of at the ankle, works really, really well. And you can see I have so many different trousers that kind of naturally end there. And then I have a couple of trousers that are a little bit longer. And so as long as they are more narrow and kind of soft, so they fit my hips, my curves, and kind of honor that, it looks all right. It looks fine. I can handle a bit of a longer length. Now, another check that I wanted to do was oversize. Now, the fact that I don't really have many oversized things is probably a good sign that I'm not long, because I naturally feel a little bit uncomfortable whenever something is very oversized. But let's say I found this jumper and like it's quite long, but I tuck it in. You can see how it has actually cinched cuffs and very narrow neckline. And so even though the item itself is quite oversized, I've subconsciously somehow followed the fact that I need narrowness somewhere. And I really like this outfit because it almost like tamed the oversizeness. So I'm wearing something that is quite big with something short and tighter. And also I wore it with some socks and very, very kind of sock boots to again create that cinching at the ankle. So there's a lot of narrowness in the outfit that almost balances the oversized. If I was truly long, and these are the outfits that I often see on models, on Pinterest, on people that are actually tall and handle long proportions really well, pairing that with my wider and long jeans would actually work really well. I feel like I look tiny, like I look really swamped in this outfit, and it's definitely not my best look. And so I don't think I can handle oversized, which means that I am not long. And by the way, if you want to know what your body matrix is, I actually have 2 different ways that you can get typed by me. There is a report option where I will do an entire 30, 40, 50 page report for you based on your photos and give you some recommendations. And I also offer the option with a call where you get to ask me any questions you might have and hear my reasoning of why I've typed you a certain way. So I'll leave the link for those services below if you want to figure out your body type. Now let's go back into the video. And so at this point, I was pretty convinced that I'm a medium length, slightly long, but generally medium. But I wanted to check that with my skirts. And so the first thing is that I actually have quite a lot of mini skirts. And all of those are the same shape. They're basically rounded and generally quite narrow. And you can see how kind of the shorter to medium that stop basically kind of mid-hip, they look fine. And then the moment that my mini skirt becomes long, so this is the longest version of a mini skirt, I don't think this looks great. Now, of course, in here, I'll probably add some tights, like it wouldn't be my bare legs, but I don't think this is the best out of all of the looks. And actually, Ellie created a really nice explanation about why this is. And so basically, there are different points. So there is the waist, there is the hip, there is the knee, and there is the ankle. And so if you are truly medium length, your skirts will basically stop more or less at the middle point between each of those. So for example, they'll stop either here at the knee or kind of in between the knee and the ankle. So they'll stop kind of mid-calf. And you can see how this skirt and most of the previous skirts kind of stop mid-thigh, which for me is a really good length for mini skirts. Versus this one is actually not stopping at the knee, which is a good point, and it is not stopping mid-hip, which is also a good point. And so it's kind of this in-between length that just doesn't flatter me as much. Same thing you can see with the more kind of wider A-line skirts. Again, I can handle a little bit of width because like this top is very narrow, but you can see how this is almost like it's fine, but a bit too short. This one is fine, and this one is okay, but it's a little bit too long. But this is probably better than this in terms of proportions. And similarly with the more kind of A-line stiffer skirts, again, you can see how this one kind of stops mid-hip, which is a better length than this one that is kind of in between the knee and the hip and is not actually great. And you can see how knee-length skirts work absolutely fine because that's kind of this medium point. It stops kind of at the knee, not above the knee and not just below the knee. They work really fine. And if we look at kind of like pencil skirts or fitted skirts, this would be the shortest version of that. This would be the medium version and this would be the long. And I feel like those, in terms of length, look much better than this and this. All of them kind of work as they're all midi skirts, like they're not extreme in any way, but I feel like the medium length definitely looks the best. And if we start looking at midi skirts that are a little bit more open, I would say that probably these are not all my best silhouettes, and especially like if we start to get towards wider ones, they're not my best. But we can see kind of because they're the correct length, all of them kind of stop at this sort of mid-calf above the ankle point. They look proportionate. I feel like I look absolutely fine in here. And something that has maybe a bit more width is made here of satin, really soft faux leather and really light wool. And so those are more dynamic, softer fabrics, which kind of accommodates the shape factor and also the narrowness. Like narrowness wants kind of lighter, crispier fabrics, and those are definitely lighter. And so I feel like midi length works quite well on me, and all the other ones that I've shown you also work quite well. And so basically I've sort of settled in that I am medium in terms of the body matrix. But what do I do with the fact that I actually appear longer? How do I leverage that to create better outfits? Well, this is where the vertical line is actually really important. So someone that is long or kind of has long proportions, one of the recommendations for them would be to either have an unbroken vertical or to have at least one long line in their outfits. And so for example, in here, you can see how this is an unbroken vertical. It's all one color, kind of monochrome. Or in here, let's say the vertical is 1/3 top and 2/3 bottom. And so we have quite a long line at the bottom, and that looks quite nice. Now, what doesn't look great is if we have a top and a bottom that are both kind of short, because there is no long line here. We just have two short lines. And so that works really well if you are short, but it doesn't look well if you're long, like it kind of breaks the body and creates too many short lines. Now, this is why I often wear black tights with my black bottoms to create that illusion of a one longer line at the bottom. And another trick that I use sometimes is that even if I want to wear short plus short, then I have a longer coat, longer blazer, longer boots, something that creates a longer line within my outfit. And so even though the top and the bottom might on their own be short, there is something in the outfit that creates a longer line. And so that's how I found my work around this. Even though I am medium length, I usually try to create a long line somewhere in the outfit. And whether that is with the pants, with the monochrome, or with a longer piece like a longer blazer, that is usually what I'm trying to do. And so basically I've placed myself in the medium length, but definitely towards the longer side. And I've put that ankle length works best across pretty much any kind of fabric of pants. And I can do pretty much any width beyond anything that's like super, super wide. Longer pants need to be soft to medium fabrics. They need to cling at the hip and not be very, very wide at the bottom. Otherwise, that length and width becomes too much. And generally, I need to create an unbroken vertical line with the waist actually clearly visible. So you can see kind of everywhere in here, you can see my waist in all of the photos. And now the one that probably a lot of you would expect where I would place, because I have mentioned like I have curves, I have to accommodate my curves and all of that stuff many times. But I wanted to actually take you through the process because I think the results actually surprised me a little bit. So first of all, let's look at some of the clues. Now, if someone has a straight shape, anything that kind of obscures the waist and kind of hangs on the body will look really good. So both of those dresses I've tried because I feel like these are really nice and I like the style, especially something like this that has a narrow neckline, kind of very flowy hem. I tried those kind of dresses. I like them and they just look terrible on me, like absolutely terrible. And I try to, let's say, put a belt, which then breaks the line and I don't like it. So basically, I can't do obscured waist. I feel completely overwhelmed and not like myself in an obscured waist. Then I started to look at my chest, and that's what Ellie recommends. And this is what my chest looks like in sports bra and like a different sports bra. You can see kind of there is a bit of a curve, but it's not like a big curve like some of the ladies here. But again, let's say I'm somewhere between medium and round. Now, I wanted to for sure put a photo of me from like 10 years ago. Again, you can see that this is me at a much lower weight. And this is where I was actually really surprised because you can see that actually my shoulders, they are rounded, but they're not actually round. I feel like right now my shoulders are much more round because I've gained some weight and I also have a bit of muscle as well in here. So they are a bit rounder, but my natural sort of shoulder is actually kind of in between. It's not sharp, but it's not super round. And same thing, I feel like there is a bit of a curve, but that's much closer, I would say, to kind of the medium curve you see like in here or in here than it is there, right? And so I do feel like my chest is medium round now, but it was actually medium to start with. And so this is where if you gain weight, I feel like we're naturally getting a bit softer. And so you can see like I've always looked sort of fleshy, like I've never looked taut, even at a much lower weight. But at the same time, I'm not like extremely soft, extremely round. So that's why my chest is medium round right now. Now my hips, you can see even at a much lower weight here, they were quite almost like a circular shape even here and right now. So I feel like my hips definitely belong in the more rounded category regardless of the weight. And so I kind of put myself again between medium and round when it comes to shape, but definitely more towards the round. Now, another clue that I had is that when things get bulky or too long, basically any sort of top, my instinct, my urge is really to define the waist. So you can see how I'm tucking it in kind of partially or fully, and you can see how all of those straight away look better. And so if I was someone that was like straight or even medium, this would be like, those should look fine. And I feel like the tucked in version with the defined waist definitely looks better. Another way that I was looking at it is that I often use belts to kind of define the waist, to kind of emphasize the waist. I don't need it. So this look defines the waist, but I naturally, I think, would look even better if I put a belt on. And you can see kind of in here, this natural styling. Added the belt to just kind of draw the attention again to that narrower point and then create kind of the two shapes, the top and the bottom. And you can see a medium shape of trouser. So this one is kind of rounded. So it's the more rounded version of a wide leg pant versus the more straight leg version this one looks better. So I'm definitely not in the straight category. I'm definitely like medium to round. So where I place myself is that my top part is actually between medium and rounded. My bottom part is definitely pretty much at the rounded end. And so as a whole, I am closer to rounded than I am to medium. But what that means is that on the top, I can actually handle slightly more stiffer fabrics, which are more of a medium shape, kind of medium to straight shape. They still need to be light. It still needs to be a narrow neckline. You can see in here, but this is much more of a crispier cotton than, for example, silk. Right? This is corduroy. It's very thin corduroy. This is very thin cotton, very thin flannel. They're not stiff fabrics, which would be a straight shape, but I can handle more medium weight sort of fabric, right? And as long as I wear as well like kind of roundedness on the bottom, I feel like that looks good. Now the problem is when we start to lose roundedness, so we have a straight shape here and a straight shape here, pretty much. I feel like I look quite restricted here. I feel like, oh, there is like a bit of maybe softness that I'm not seeing, right? And so I can do kind of one element of slightly more stiffer fabric, slightly more structure, but not everywhere in the outfit. And you can see that it doesn't always have to be on the top. Like, I really love those jeans because they're actually really comfortable, but this is the first pair that doesn't have elasticated waist and it doesn't have elastane. They're truly straight leg jeans. Now, I wear those with either a soft, clingy, narrow top like here, or with a top that maybe has a bit of straightness, but is very light, very flowy, and has cinched wrists. So again, we're kind of honoring something rounded or medium round in here, and this is definitely a rounded top because it's clingy and has kind of the circular neckline, and so it kind of balances the straight shape. So we can only have kind of one straight shape in the outfit and everything else has to be much more rounded. And you can see even in here, like this is basically just rounded plus rounded, both on top and bottom. I think it looks great. And the moment we want to add more of a straight neckline because it has like sharper edges or a collar, I love me a good collar, then it has to be either in a clingy soft fabric like a knit with, again, you can see the cuffs are very narrow and cinched. It has to be in a flowy fabric like silk or in a stretchy cotton like this one. So for example, something that is very, very stiff, thick, oversized kind of cotton that just stands. Even this skirt wouldn't save it. It would be a bit too extreme. And so you can see I can handle a little bit of structure, especially on the top, but not much of that structure and straightness. And so basically what I place myself, you can see, is I am, let's say, medium width, but definitely with accommodations for my narrow shoulders. I am medium length, but trying to create slightly longer vertical lines for the length. And then I am also rounded, but can do a little bit of structure, especially on the top. And overall, I would say I am medium round. But if you look at, for example, narrow medium round and medium round, my drawing kind of in between. Like it's not one or the other, it's kind of in between. And so that's why I feel like my diagnosis is actually very similar to what I would do if I just looked at the drawings, kind of in between. And so you can see that each category is not just +1, 0, and -1. It's literally a spectrum. And so even though, let's say my width is medium, I need to have a bit of narrowness somewhere in the outfit, otherwise it kind of feels off. And same thing with the length. Yes, I can do medium length everywhere, but generally I try to create a slightly longer vertical line. And with the shapes as well, like, yes, I need to accommodate a lot of roundedness overall in my body, but I can do a bit of sharpness and structure, right? And so it's, again, it's a spectrum. It's not a yes or no kind of thing. And so I usually write for my clients a dressing cheat sheet based specifically on where they sit on that spectrum. And so for me, for example, I put that there needs to be some narrowness somewhere in the outfit, but also there needs to be some openness in the outfit. I need to avoid extremely wide or open items, whether on top or bottom. Just extreme width doesn't work. Ankle length pants are best, and I can do a little bit longer if I wish, and the waist needs to be defined. I need to wear mid-hip or mid-calf skirts. Those are the best. I need to create as much as I can either an unbroken vertical or have the vertical be 1/3 and 2/3. Rather than just breaking it in half. I need to accommodate my curves, especially on the bottom, but then balance the roundedness with a little bit of straightness or structure somewhere in the outfit. It can even be an accessory. So now that we know my body matrix type, what does that actually mean about my style and how I dress myself? Well, firstly, I feel really validated because for the longest time, I've struggled to really find my Kibbe body type. And I felt like soft classic was probably the closest to where my body is. But at the same time, I kept hearing from a lot of people that, well, soft classic is where people start, but they're usually not. And I feel like that confusion, whether I'm soft classic or soft dramatic, and I feel like I'm kind of in between those two types, makes sense right now based on my body matrix. Secondly, in terms of what I wear, I feel that as long as I avoid any sort of extreme shapes, I am able to put outfits that look harmonious and good. And so most of the time, if I want to look flattering in any way, for example, for an interview, presentation, or any place where I feel like it's not the best place to just experiment with a new look, I know how to put together an outfit that does me justice, that looks good, that looks harmonious, and that I also feel really good in. And so that is where I would usually avoid anything that is too wide or too oversized or too long or too short, like anything that is extreme. Now, in my day-to-day life, though, I actually really enjoy experimenting. And so, for example, I would wear a very oversized blazer with very short shorts. And so that is definitely not the best or most flattering outfit, but it is an outfit that actually makes me feel really happy. And it kind of honors that gamine essence of playfulness and liking to try new things. And so for me, I don't want to lose that at this point in time. And so I am going to continue to wear some shapes that are perhaps not the optimal, not the best. And as long as I try to balance, which I think is kind of my intuitive nudge anyway, I feel like I'm still going to look okay. Am I going to look my best? Probably not. But do I care? Not really, because I'm going to continue expressing my style. And so for me, finding that body matrix type has been really freeing. And so if you want to know what your body matrix type is, I actually offer two different options. I offer the report only, or I offer the one with a call where you actually get to ask me any questions and we can make your recommendations even more personal. So I'll leave the links below. And if you want to know what other systems I recommend when it comes to improving your personal style, check out this video right here.